The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
And a happy Sunday to you. Welcome on in. It is a special edition of First and 12 this weekend. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper coming together on a pre-rivalry week edition of the program. And yes, both teams have a bye this week. You know, that means not a lot of games to break down, but nonetheless, this is one of the most exciting times that we've had in a long time. If you're following BYU, if you're following Utah, BYU, of course, because of its magical season that they've had so far. Mitch Harper, BYU insider for KSLSports.com, of course, on the other end of the ether. Mitch, it's been a wild season. I want to just get your thoughts on what it's been like covering this team so far. 8-0 right now, number 9 in the AP poll. The first college football playoff projections or playoff rankings, not projections. The actual first playoff rankings come out this week, and It's been a wild one to be able to cover, man. It must be awesome to be able to be inside those locker rooms and follow it all.
It has been, and any thought of what BYU has been in the past has not applied to this team. The day game thing, the 2 time zones, or going on the road, hostile environments. They just always pass with flying colors. Letdown game in a day spot at home, national spotlights growing. They just continue to pass with flying colors, and they're doing it with Jake Retzlaff, and it's still kind of surreal to think that's happened to where, 2 months ago at this time, a lot of people, including myself, were very, questioning of Jake Retzlaff, what his ceiling was. I mean, I thought the ceiling for this team was 6-6 with Jake Retzlaff or Gary Bohannon. And for them to be 8-0 and the best team in the Big 12 Conference heading into the rivalry game, it's just very surreal. But yes, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a team that's had a little bit of an edge. They were salty in the first month of the season. That's kind of died down, at least with the media, but still they've got this chip on the shoulder where they feel like no one believes in them, and it's leading to now this rivalry game where they have another chance to continue to elevate their profile.
So one thing that happened that's interesting this week, you brought up Jake Retzlaff, and frankly, it is funny for me, and you and I have this discussion all the time, all the people who come out of the woodwork like, I can't believe – JJ and I got accused this week, like, remember when JJ and Alex said before the season they can't believe that BYU hasn't named a starter? You sound kind of dumb right now, don't you? I'm going, no, why didn't they name the starter if they knew he was going to be this good? There's no freaking way they would have waited to announce the starter. I think that's two things that happen. It shows you how Jake Retzlaff, like, that competition was legit. Like, between he and Gary Bohannon, it was close enough. And they pushed each other enough. They probably both got really freaking good. You got to give some credit to the fact that Gary Bohannon probably pushed Jake Retzlaff, and they both probably got better during all that. And so BYU's got a great starting quarterback right now, and they probably have a pretty darn good backup, even though we haven't seen Gary. That was a legit quarterback controversy. So everybody acting like they knew how this thing was going to go is insane to me. But that's just my thought.
It's so true, though, because if there was – a clear feeling of Jake Retzlaff is the future. He's QB1. They would have toted him around Big 12 media days. They would have had him everywhere in the spotlight. But
doing what they're doing now, by the way, with him,
right.
Just being on everything.
Yes, whereas they were not amplifying his story of his path to BYU in the preseason because it wasn't clear that he was going to be in this spot. And even after week 2, after SMU where they win 18-15, you're thinking, okay, you got to win, but – and remember, SMU looked really bad against Nevada in week 0, and you're thinking, how good of a win was that? And, everything's just kind of worked out for BYU, and they've just gotten better and better and better, and it just continues to be a snowball effect, and Jake's playing with incredible confidence right now, and this BYU team is just flying high to where they now go into this rivalry game coming up this Saturday, and it feels like they should win decisively potentially, but we know these rivalry, the history of this thing, anything can happen, but it's a wild turn of events what's happened this season.
I did want to play for you too. Speaking of Jake Retzlaff doing the media tour this week, of course, I know that these guys. I know that the team, what they say, Kalani's message is, well, no one was talking about us in August, and now suddenly they're asking us all these questions. Like, well, you can understand why people might have been a little bit gun shy about the whole thing. How BYU was going to do. We knew how good we were. I don't think anybody, even inside that locker room, thought that they were 8-0 good, but they certainly take it game by game. And Jake Retzlaff was on the Jim Rome show this week, and I grabbed a little chunk of what he said to Jim Rome as he's been a little bit in the spotlight. Here's BYU's quarterback Jake Retzlaff on Jim Rome's national show.
Dude, it was this offseason, man. We had a feeling in this building that we knew that nobody knew what was going to go on here in Provo. So, I mean, just winter workouts, spring ball, leading into the summer training and the fall camp, man. There was the feeling all along that we had the type of urgency and we had the type of team that can do something special this year.
We're talking to Jake Retzlaff. Jake, looking back, it's kind of hard to imagine. Like, you knew that, but outside the building, obviously, it was not well known because the media picked BYU to finish 13th in the preseason Big 12 media poll. It tells you what we media scrubs know or don't know. Like, what did the voters not know about this team that they should have known?
Just the way this team plays together, the way we play for each other, the chemistry here, the culture here, I believe is second to none. Coach Kalani has set a standard, and the guys meet it every single day. It's one of those things that's a little bit intangible. It's hard to really put a finger on what it is that brings this team across the finish line each week. But, we do a good job playing together, man. The love for this team is second to none, and the urgency this offseason was at an all-time high. And I don't think anybody knew that we were acting as urgent as we were. I don't think any of those media members actually showed up to practices and watched us play or anything. They just kind of based us off of last year. And last year obviously wasn't the year we wanted it to be, but with 50, 60 new guys in the building, we kind of, got through last season as the new team in the Big 12. And now we're a team, we're a unit that's united.
So, Mitch, I was going to run it past you. I can't believe you wouldn't go to those practices, man. I just love this whole I couldn't put my finger on it, what it is about this team is because there's actually I'm convinced that we actually don't know the exact answer. There's a lot that is added up to be where this team is right now. Just like there's a lot that's added up to where Utah is where they are right now. The story of every season ends up unfolding, and it's very rare that we have this type of disparity of where the expectations are or as to what we think that the talent level is with these teams. And BYU obviously going 8-0 was a shock, but Utah losing the last 4 games in a row, being in the spot that they are is equally, it might actually be a little bit more shocking than what BYU has been going through this season. I don't know where you put it, but I mean, like, it's equally as strange to see Utah in the spot that they are, to see BYU achieving at the level that they are.
Yeah, it's shocking, and that shock value was amplified when they lost to Houston because, Utah's got talent, and there's no shortage of that. But it's just when you hear from Jake Retzlaff the culture piece, and you thought Utah's culture was dialed in too, but maybe some new faces in key spots, has rattled the culture a little bit. I don't know. Is it solely the transition to the Big 12? I wish I had a clear understanding because I do feel like in the trenches, Utah still got really good talent, but the offensive line hasn't lived up to expectations. Defense is still stout, but they lack the playmakers on the offensive side right now that consistently contribute outside of Mekhi Bernard. And when it's just, kind of a one-man band, it's just not going to lead to much success. You got to be versatile, and you got to have the playmakers, especially at quarterback, and that's where things have really went south for Utah. Whereas I thought that quarterback unit for Utah was going to be incredibly deep. It's not, and it really hung on Cam Rising, and it feels like their season kind of went out the door a little bit. At least the expectations of playoff and a Big 12 title went out the door when he went down. And look, they can now play spoiler, but I don't feel like this is not. Like, this is reverting back to Utah of the 90s, of the 80s, where it was spoiling BYU seasons, and no Utah fan wants to talk like that because they feel like that was a distant memory, and they've moved on from that side of things of trying to play spoiler for BYU. So just spoiling BYU's season won't be enough to salvage, I think, this season that had such high aspirations, to the point where even Kyle Whittingham was talking in the preseason about this team's pretty loaded.
What is the underlying issue, do you think, at Utah? I mean, there's the offensive woes. I think that this is actually something that's been coming for a while, and I think it was covered up by a lot of the of the play that Cam Rising was, contributing during his, the stretch of him being really, really good. You were kind of like, hey, man, this guy's really awesome, and he's a Kyle Whittingham guy. He plays a certain way, the type of player that Kyle Whittingham loves. And I think that some of it got covered up. I mean, the reality is that the NIL money that was thrown at him and the hurt feelings that go along with that. And by the way, we've heard rumblings of NIL money and what is and is not being paid to players after they were told that maybe they would get it. I mean, that's the mess of where we are with college football. But the whole Cam Rising episode and the soap opera that it's been this year, and now even the crazy thing is this week after they announced that Money Parks would be out for the rest of the season and that Cam Rising was having surgery this week, and they still haven't talked at length really with Cam about the possibility of him coming back for an 8th season. Like, Utah fans should be absolutely beside themselves going, run away as fast as you can. You have to move on from that situation. And I think it's just been a pall over the program, that entire thing. It's weird because the guy that's brought you so much success, now whatever the thing is that's been revolving around him and his injuries and the NIL money and everything that goes on behind the scenes has actually, I think, contributed to the crash that has happened this year with this Utah team.
It's a good point. And it, I'm surprised that Utah felt like a team that was just built on one guy, because it just felt like they had way much more than that. But, rivalries bring out, some crazy, unexpected results, and maybe, Utah can salvage this season. But I think what makes this difficult, even if they defeated BYU and sprung an upset, is that Kyle Whittingham is nearing the end. I mean, he said as much in July when, it was about that Miami-Utah game in 2027. He's like, I'm not going to be the head coach. So he kind of gave us an unofficial timeline of when he's, going to be hanging it up. And it's now clear that Morgan Scalley's the coach in waiting now for the Utes. And you thought the one missing piece on Whittingham's resume is a playoff appearance. And you thought with the 12-team playoff being created, that was going to be motivation, despite a conference change that probably they didn't want to go to. That was going to be enough motivation to say, okay, we got to break through. We got a perfect chance to break free, and they just haven't. And they stumbled out of the gate because the team was just built on one guy, and that was not a recipe for success. Right. And it leads to Ludwig being ousted and gone, and it's just
even like Bajakian, Mike Bajakian comes in as the interim, and they're like, hey, so what's going to happen this week? Like, what are some things you want to immediately change? Yeah. Well, the system is the system. And
that was concerning.
The system is the system, but that's the system that everyone hates right now, and it's a system that's not working. So what's going on? And then to take that loss at Houston, I mean, that's a bad – dude,
terrible.
Mitch, that's an awful Houston team. Like, that team does not even know what they're doing. And the reality is, yeah, they got athletes on the team, but what a mess to go down there and lose to a team that has no business beating Utah, like, for the next decade. The reality is that Houston team has no business being on that field with Utah, and they freaking beat them because that team is such a mess right now. That is it's an awful place to be in as a Utah fan because they have not felt this in a long time. And yeah, welcome to the way that BYU fans have felt over a long period of time, which is watching the other team in your state perform exceedingly well and overachieve and be in the national spotlight and be talked about, and then people are going, so what's you guys' problem, right? And so that's an awful place to be. Let's take our first break. We'll come back. It is 1st and 12, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone, and also KSL News Radio. You can hear it right here every week. You can also download the podcast. When we come back, let's listen to some of the things that Kyle Whittingham said during his bye-week press conference and kind of where this team is, and we'll see if they can kind of get things right. But you've got a couple of weeks, or less than a week now, running up till BYU and Utah fire up as conference mates for the first time in a long time. We've got tons to talk about. Stay right here with us. It's all brought to you by Macy's. Of course, the freshest fruits and vegetables and your local favorite brands. It's all at Macy's. Happy shopping. They bring you 1st and 12. We're going to take a break here. More to go right here. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.